Howdy humans, welcome back. Sunday afternoon, I'm out and about again. In fact, it's the first time I've been out properly in very nearly a week. I've had a very quiet week. At home, doing a few bits and pieces. Off to the cinema this afternoon, though, I'm going to see Smile 2. The sequel to the original Smile, which came out, 2-3 years ago, probably? Which I really enjoyed. So, Sunday afternoon at the cinemas. I shall report back after this. And we're back in the cinema room. The day afterwards, it's now Monday, nearly lunchtime. If you're new here, by the way, why not like and subscribe? This channel is full of cult TV, cult movies, new TV, new movies, unboxings, collectibles, DVDs, Blu-rays, all that sort of crazy physical media stuff. Stick around, you might find something you like and subscribe. Smile 2 is directed by Parker Finn. It is the sequel to the 2022 hit Smile, and this is a very smart, slick, engrossing supernatural thriller which carries on the story of this strange entity that possesses people and feeds off them and torments them and turns their minds inside out, forces them to suffer horrific hallucinations, to think that they're going completely insane. As I said, it's a sequel to the first film. I sort of wish I'd watched the first film again before seeing the second one, because I was a little bit baffled by the first sequence, which is terrific, by the way. He's trying to pass on the Smile Demon to some gangsters, some drug dealers. That goes horribly wrong, but he inadvertently passes it on to a young lad called Lee, who has come to the dealer's den just to pick up some drugs. Joel escapes out into the wild, but he's run down by a truck. You might have seen that in the trailer, and leaves a trail of blood and gore across the road, which has sort of set us up for what's to happen in the film. Shortly thereafter, we meet Sky Riley, played by Naomi Scott. She's a pop superstar. She's sort of in the vein of Ariana Grande, Dua Lipa, that sort of pop star whose music is very sort of light R&B, pop, funk sort of thing. She's emerging from a year in which she's been recovering from a terrible car accident which killed her boyfriend, Paul Hudson. Turns out that Sky had an addictive personality, become hooked on drugs and booze, as we see in a couple of flashbacks throughout the film. Their car careered off the road. Paul was killed, she survived, and she spent a year in rehab, getting off the drugs, getting clean. And her mother, played brilliantly by Rosemary DeWitt, has been working on putting her career back together, getting a new tour sorted out for her. And at the beginning of the film, she goes on a chat show hosted by Drew Barrymore to reintroduce herself, apologise for the things that have happened in the past, and promise this will never happen again. We then see her rehearsing for the concert, a very high energy and high intensity dance routine with some dancers, but she sort of stops halfway through. She's got some terrible pain in her back. She's got scars down her belly, one in her back from the injuries from the car accident, and she's deposited back to her hotel. She's got a long day of promotional duties the next day. But she contacts her friend Lee, an old school friend of hers, who is, of course, the guy that we met at the very beginning of the film. He's sort of a dealer, but she goes to him to get some painkillers. She doesn't want any addictive drugs. She doesn't want coke or heroin or any of that. She just wants some painkillers for this agonising pain that she's got. When she gets to Lee's apartment, he's in a state of some distress. He seems to be hyper. He doesn't know what day it is. He doesn't know what's going on. He can't remember Lee having contacted her. He's very worked up about something. He goes off into another room to get some drugs for her, get the painkillers that she wants, and suddenly it goes quiet. Then he emerges from the back room completely insane. He's wild, he's crazy, he's completely hallucinating. Then he does something terrible, again, which you've seen in the trailer, which involves a freestanding weight from his home gym. This sets off a chain of events that powers the rest of the film, as the Smile Demon has now transferred its attentions to Sky, and as the film progresses, she gets more and more paranoid. More and more bizarre things are happening. She's seeing visions of Lee in his, shall we say, decimated state. Everything seems to be working against her. She's hallucinating certain things. She attends a signing event and she sees a young girl smiling. It's creepy, it's eerie, it's unnatural, it's unnerving. And Sky's condition continues to deteriorate. Her presence at the scene when Lee was killed, which she hopes that nobody's picked up on, she gets a couple of messages, mysterious phone messages from somebody who appears to to know what's going on. She eventually arranges to meet this guy, and he tells her that he knows about the demon, he knows what it is, and he wants to defeat it. The only way to destroy it, now it's in Skye, is to effectively stop her heart for a period of time, so the demon will die and vacate her body and then dissipate, having not been transferred to another body. Skye dismisses this as ridiculous and ludicrous until she's driven to complete distraction. And things get worse and worse, and eventually she finds herself surrendering to this guy and deciding that his solution is the only solution. This is a seriously good horror film. I mean, sequels, there's very often with sequels, you have a hit film, and Smile was a massive hit on a budget of $17 million. It made worldwide $217 million, so a sequel was inevitable. And to be fair, there was plenty of room for a sequel in the story. And in fact, there's plenty of room for a sequel after this one, but we'll come back to that. But no, with horror films, once you get the first hit, the first idea, when you go back to that idea, it sort of starts to peter out, because you think, yeah, well, we know about this. This is a repeat of what we've had before. We don't get so much of that with this particular version of Smile, because it's a bigger story. It's a scarier story in a way, because it builds quite subtly. Skye's deterioration comes along in increments, and she slowly starts to lose control. One moment she seems to be in control, she seems to be this shiny, happy pop star meeting and greeting her fans, and something happens that sets her off, and she sees something, or something's happening behind her, or something's happening in her apartment that unnerves her and disturbs her. And that's what's horrifying about it. It's not so much the jump scares, there's plenty of those. It's not so much the horrific images, there's plenty of those. It's this sense of impending terror. Something is happening. It's the old horror thing of what you don't see is more scary than what you do. We're in her head as things start to go wrong. And because she's a likeable character, we're on her side, and we sort of want her to prevail, and we don't want her life to fall apart. But of course, inevitably, it does start to fall apart, and things get worse and worse. And the film ends with something bizarre and extraordinary. And I have to mention it because, having torn a strip off The Substance a couple of weeks ago for going too far, there is a moment when you think, oh, hang on, this is a bit too much. This is a bit too extreme. Not in the way that The Substance was, where I felt it was comedic, what they did towards the end. This drifts into slightly similar territory in terms of what happens in the last few minutes of the film. But it doesn't take it to those ludicrous extremes that I felt that The Substance is. This holds back a little bit and creates some very memorable images, whereas what we see at the end of The Substance, to me, was silly and comedic. This is actually quite horrific and quite ghastly and horrifying. And the film ends with a terrific, not exactly a cliffhanger, but a terrifying prospect for a third film with what happens at the very end. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil that. This is a film that hinges entirely, however, upon the extraordinary performance from Naomi Scott as Skye. This is, as many people, including Mark Kermode, have pointed out, this is really an award-worthy performance. I mean, it won't get an award, certainly not in the Oscars, because the Oscars don't exactly recognise horror as a valid art form, which is a shame, because, you know, it's acting like any other acting performance. The genre shouldn't matter. But her performance here is so totally immersive. You believe that this girl is this pop star. You believe that she is somebody whose life is falling apart and she can't understand why. And she can't believe what's happening when she finds out what it is. It's an astonishing performance, and the camera is up close to her quite a lot. And you can see it all in her face, the terror in her eyes. It's an incredible performance that really, I mean, I'm sure it will win awards in various horror ceremonies and so on, but it really deserves wider recognition, and I think it is time that Hollywood took these sorts of films more seriously, because sometimes the acting is just off the charts. And I think certainly in terms of Naomi Scott, we're not likely to see a better performance in a genre film this year. Absolutely fantastic performance. I really enjoyed this film. I didn't think I would, because I went in, it's over 2 hours long, and I thought horror films really need to be 100 minutes tops. And this tops 2 hours, 2 hours, 9, 10 minutes. But it never felt its length, because it is so gripping and immersive from the very beginning. Even that scene that was a bit dislocated from the main film, and it's only later on when I came home and sort of looked back at the first film and looked back at what this scene meant and how it connected to the first film, that I realised how important it is and how much it strings together the film. As the director has said, there are a couple of ambiguities, things that aren't answered, and that's fine, because that leads us on to what's obviously going to be a third film, because you don't need everything answered, certainly not in supernatural films, because the very nature that they're supernatural, there aren't necessarily nice, tidy, pat explanations for everything. Things that happen, and it's all because of the weird and wonderful. And I think there's no problem with things not being explained. I think as long as the beats of the story hang together and the events make sense and the character motivations and actions make sense, I don't think it matters that we don't know the background of the demon and we don't know exactly how it operates. That's part of the genre. It's a very satisfying film. It's very well made. It's very powerful, very haunting. And it doesn't, although there are, as I said, there are jump moments because horror does that. But that doesn't decry from it. And some horror films have got jump moments because that's all they've got. This has got more than that. So the jumps are deserved within the story that we've got. And as I said, with an incredible performance from Naomi Scott, this is a film which I recommend for horror hounds, definitely. And even for people who aren't necessarily into horror, there's an interesting story here, and it's a well-crafted film that I think deserves the success it's already getting. It's came out this weekend. It's made on a budget of 28 million, obviously cost a bit more than the first one, but already it's, after its first 3 or 4 days, on $46 million worldwide. So it's another big hit, and that's the thing about horror film. They're cheap as chips, and they very often make a lot of money. The flip side of that, of course, the downside is that we often get sequels that we don't need to certain films. Sometimes horror hits its sweet spot, and this certainly does. Smile 2, absolutely superb, really loved it. I'm going to give it great big 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 for me for Smile 2. In cinemas now. Recommended if you've got a fairly strong stomach. It's not incredibly gory. There are some queasy moments that you might want to look away. It depends what your tolerance is for these things. I have a fairly high tolerance, but even I found it was a bit ooh in places. Smile 2, terrific. Really enjoyed it. Right, thank you for watching. As I said, if you are new here, if you've enjoyed this review, I try to keep it shortish because there are lots of reviews of this film out there, and this channel does concentrate a bit more on retro material. But if you've enjoyed this channel, look back at some of my previous videos, like and subscribe. I'll see you soon. Until I do, you keep taking that stuff.